Recently, I've been seeing more and more teenage authors popping up online, and it seems like they are everywhere. Whether I am on YouTube, Pinterest, or any other social media site, I can always find at least a few whenever I enter writing related spaces. And I find this exciting because I was one myself. I was published for the first time at 15 through a nonprofit that partnered with my local library. Later on, I decided to pursue publishing with a couple of novellas, which I hope to develop into a full series over time. I started with querying, but soon turned my attention to self-publishing, which I'll get into later. And by the time I was 19, I had 2 books out in the world for anyone to purchase and read. This is not a time that I look back on fondly for multiple reasons, but some of those reasons could have been avoided. So, to the teen authors out there who may stumble upon this YouTube video, here is the advice I wish I would have received as a teenage author. Some of my biggest regrets come from my early writing career, if you could call it that. I found out about self-publishing fresh out of high school, which is where I finished writing 2 novellas. I was itching to get my work out there and spent hours researching and querying agents before I learned that I could do everything myself, for a price. When learning about self-publishing, I quickly became overwhelmed by the cost of hiring an illustrator and an editor. What I had saved from my weekend job was not enough to cover that, but I jumped on the opportunity anyway. I mean, I had put in the hours on both novellas, and obviously if the writing was good enough, it wouldn't need a super fancy cover or professional editing. Of course, formatting a manuscript would be easy too with the right tools. So I slapped together a cover, attempted to format my book, only to find a slew of issues after I published the first one. Oops. And did a basic grammar and spell check on my manuscripts, and threw my stories onto Amazon's marketplace. Don't do that! This was the fastest way to ensure that only my family members would buy my books, and that any experienced author, self-published or otherwise, within a 1,000-mile radius would recognize me as an amateur. The covers were okay at best, the page numbers weren't even in the right places, and a basic grammar check won't catch inconsistencies in the descriptions in the same way another person would. Those books have been wiped off the internet by now, and they're under a name that I don't claim anymore, but I still cringe a little thinking about how badly those books came out because I was super eager to get them out there. Take your time, save up some money, and give your book the love and care it deserves. Or be prepared to make mistakes while learning how to do everything yourself. Except the editing. Don't skip on the editing. This is probably one of the biggest tips I have for young authors, though I occasionally see it in older ones too. Recently, I was talking with a classmate about creative writing when I recommended some of our university's courses to him. Now, I just earned my bachelor's degree in English with a minor in creative writing, so I was recommended the ones that I genuinely improved from, figuring he would find those kinds of classes fun. When I explained to him that one of my past professors was an award-winning author and that I learned a lot from his courses, he said, even if I had the option of learning from an award-winning author, I probably wouldn't because what I'm doing now works perfectly. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of how I thought about writing when I was younger. I thought my writing was quote-unquote perfect, but you already know where that got me. The conversation didn't continue much further beyond that point. When you are doing anything creative, it is important to stay humble. As soon as you think you've learned everything there is to learn, that your work is the cream of the crop and that no improvements can be made to your writing, your structuring, your characters, your descriptions, you know what happens? You stagnate. You stop growing and learning and stop improving, and that will kill your progress. I was humbled hard in a creative writing class right before I turned 20, and I am thankful for it every day. I would not have continued to grow as an author if I wouldn't have had that experience, and I wouldn't be writing the stories that I am today. Even if my novellas would have been picked up by an agent instead of being self-published, the errors I made in this area would have left them dead in the water and unpublishable. I'm going to tread lightly in this section because I don't want to get sued, but there are some writing websites out there that tout protections for authors under foreign copyright laws and promise to have editors read over your work if you post on their site. I posted to one of them before, and I can tell you right now, there is no way that an actual person read through that story and didn't notice all my missing commas and sentence fragments. Also, posting with that particular site gave them first publication rights to my work, which means that any other publisher would not pick them up even if they were interested. Check the terms of service on every writing platform you share your stories on. It might affect your rights to your own work as an author. Along the same vein, if you plan on submitting your work to publications, journals, and competitions, do not post it anywhere online. Most places will not accept previously published work, and posting it online counts. Also, look into every publication you submit to for the same reasons I expressed for the websites. You don't want to get scammed. When you're writing your first book, or even your third or fourth, it's tempting to bury yourself in as much writing advice as possible. You'll overload yourself with rules like set is dead and never use adverbs, but what those articles can't give you are in-depth examples of how these tips work or how the rules can be broken. While I was taking those really influential creative writing classes, the ones that I talked about in the ego section, I noticed that while we were still assigned craft essays, we were also assigned specific short stories that showed us examples of what those essays preached. On top of that, we were required to write at least 500 words about how the short story related to the essay. This amounted to having to write 1,000 words per week in class and double that when workshops came around, but it was infinitely more helpful than just reading advice articles over and over again. Nothing quite shows you how show, don't tell works quite like reading and picking apart a short story that adequately does both. And if you find stories you like, you may find that you adopt the parts of those authors' writing styles to create your own. Remember, rules can be broken if you break them the right way. You won't learn how to if you don't read real examples. This lesson probably took the longest to set in for me, but it's an important one. When I first started taking writing seriously, I sought approval from people around me. I almost never wrote anything for myself. Every one of my stories was dedicated to someone else. For a year and a half, I dated a guy that would get mad when I didn't portray characters in the way that he wanted me to. When I first created one of my OCs, Cassandra, it was to roleplay with this ex in an online game. After a while, I decided to write a story featuring both of our characters, and guess what? Cassandra quickly became a bystander in the story that she was the narrator of, shoved aside by my ex's character, and the worst part was that I went along with it. I never ended up finishing that book and actually moved on to writing my novellas after the breakup. The focus of my approval shifted, but not inwardly like it should have. When I originally started my novellas, the main characters were lesbian. Just like Cassandra and Vex, the main characters in my current writing project, which if you're subscribed to my channel, you will be hearing a lot more about them soon. Now, I prefer to write stories featuring queer characters, and that was the case back then too, but when I was halfway through one of my stories, I began to consider seeking publication. Then that made me think of all of the people in my extended family who would read them, and I got so scared of facing backlash for having openly queer characters that I ended up turning the love interest into a man. This, in turn, led to a massive shift in the direction of the story. I felt like I had to make the story as heteronormative as possible, which led to me writing something that I did not resonate with at all. This does not mean that you shouldn't listen to criticism or suggestions, but if you want to write something and the only reason you can think of to not is that someone else won't like it, write it anyway. At the end of the day, you will have a more enjoyable time writing if you are writing something you actually want to, not what you think others would expect from you. That's all the advice that I have for the teenage writers and authors out there. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. That being said, I want to point out that I do not see myself as a teacher when I make videos like these, but more like a student sharing my own findings. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking it and letting me know if there are any other writing related topics you would like me to cover. I'm always open to new ideas. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel if you want to see more stuff like this. I am also working on putting together a Discord server so we can all, talk about writing and stuff together. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Anyway, have a great day, my lovely Inkblots, and good luck on all your writing projects.